In this module, we're going to talk about the main differences between selling and account management. But before we do that, I just want to make sure we understand that it's not that one's good and the other's bad. Selling is not a bad thing and account management is not a good thing, or vice versa. It's just that they're different things and each is applicable in the right circumstances. So let's start by having a little think about what we mean when we talk about selling. What do we typically expect to see in the selling process? When we're selling, we start with a focus generally on what we want. We start typically by establishing a sales target, and more often than not, this target's generated from within the supplier. And it's driven by what the supplier believes it needs to achieve. It's very usual to find the sales target is established by the senior team or the C-suite, for example, and then the sales VP will allocate it in some way across the selling team. A general salesperson is given the target, and the role of salesperson then becomes to sell the target. The target is likely to be a sales revenue figure expressed in money, and the salesperson may or may not get a customer margin target, but in most cases, the salesperson has very limited ability to influence the margin other than to, well, frankly, to cut the price after agreement with the sales manager. How does this differ from account management? Well, of course, we have to be very clear about what we want to achieve, but the growth target with the key account starts not with some generic growth figure set out by the CFO, but by considering the specific growth opportunities to grow the business with the key account. Instantly, this figure is generally much greater than the targets set by the CFO. All the research shows that there is normally far more real growth potential than the corporate office believes. So it's important that we do it in this way to avoid that situation where your company sets a growth target for your key account without any reference to what you should be doing with the customer. Not only must we have a realistic growth target, but if we don't get the target based on a real live opportunity, then we won't allocate the right level of resources to the development of that key account. And this is a big issue for many companies which don't set accurate growth targets. For example, if we can see opportunities to double our business, then we need to allocate a great deal more resource to that account. Conversely, if we see no chance for growth, then allocating a high growth target to that customer is not going to change the situation. So targets have to be grounded in commercial reality. Whereas the sales target tends to measure revenue only, the key account target will measure revenue and margin equally. Let's now think about the process of selling and account management. Selling, I think, tends to be a linear process focusing on achieving a sale. We work through a series of steps: customer needs analysis, confirmation of needs, sales presentation to pitch the solution, handling questions, objections, closing the deal, hopefully then winning the business. The focus is relatively short term, and it finishes when we win or when we don't win the deal. If we win, then we might hand over the customer to another team to implement the agreement. For some companies, the sales process doesn't even start until they receive an RFP, RFQ, or if a contract's coming to an end, or if a customer has made a request of some sort. Account management is very different. For a start, I tend to see account management not as a linear process, but as a circular process. It doesn't start at one place and stop at another, but instead it continues over time in an iterative way. So we're constantly learning more about the customer, learning about their business, and how we can support them meet and develop working relationships with more of their people, and so on. We never get to the point where we've finished or where the process ends. We don't wait for an RFP to take action because we're constantly taking action. And of course, ideally, we want to work to a position where we've developed the relationship so that we don't have a requirement for an RFP at all. Selling tends to be quite a reactive process. Generally, we wait until the customer makes a request and then we respond. So the customer may ask for some help, for a quote, for some information, may want us to join in on a tender. Generally, the customer is going to begin the process. But in account management, we cannot wait for the customer to work out how we might be able to add value. The customer doesn't know enough about our business anyway, and it's our role, really. We're not interested in being seen as yet another competent supplier. We want to be the single preferred supplier. We want to win all the desired share with the customer. So the role of the account manager is not to wait for the customer to tell you what it needs, but to be telling the customer what it needs. And that's why you need such a deep working knowledge of the customer's business. Selling is typically reactive, whereas account management is typically proactive. So I'm going to leave you to think about these issues, your current approach, make some notes in your workbook, and when we return, we'll continue this discussion in the next unit.